Good day, class. Once again, my name is Engineer Joshua. We're here to talk on the lesson three that has to do with causes of hazard or accidents. Of course, you remember what the module we are considering is on occupational health and electrical workplace safety. So we've looked at the concept of hazard. Hazard itself, what hazard means, according to William Hammond. We've looked at hazard in that scenario and types of hazards that you can see at home and what in the workplace environment. So that's in the previous lessons, and now we're considering the causes of what hazards. What are the causes of hazard? Accidents can happen anytime. Of course, we know. Accident can happen at any time. Obviously, they are not intentional. And there are infinite possibility for something to what? Always go wrong. Like I said, there are some accidents we say out of God. It can just happen. Of course, there is another saying that says accidents don't just what? Happen. They are caused. Accidents don't just happen, they are caused. So if you don't consider hazards, you don't recognize hazards in an environment or workplace, then you result to what? Accidents. And that is why we have to put into consideration possible ways that leads to what? Accidents. Common causes of workplace accidents you can what? Experience. So you can prepare to prevent injuries and other incidents when you know what? The causes of hazards. You avoid what? Accidents or incidents as the case may be. So now we're looking at types of some common causes of hazards in our workplace environment. Like I said in previous classes, one of it is what? Lifting. Lifting. That has to do with if you don't consider proper material handling, then you can cause injury to what? Your back. To eliminate injuries and muscle strain, you have to what? Consider the proper way of what? Lifting materials or objects in the workplace environment. It's always best to recruit a helping hand or use machinery to move what? A large objects. When you need to what? You lift objects. You have to what? Ask for a helping hand or you use machineries. There are other equipments that you use in carrying heavy objects. So lifting is one of the causes of hazards that leads to accident. Improper lifting can lead to that. And of course, lighting. Lighting, as you can see, if there are no proper lighting, improper lighting, poor lighting can be a major cause of trips. If you don't see, if you are working in a confined environment and there is no proper lighting, it can lead to what? Trips and fall. So this is one of the causes of the workplace injury. Then we also looked at violence. It's called foul play. Then you unnecessary sounds, noise around the workplace. So hundreds of people die each year from workplace what? Violence, like disputes amongst workers, amongst trainees, and all that. So these are one of the things in your safety. We consider this improper what? This foul play or horseplay, what they call horseplay and all that. These are not what allowed in the workplace environment. So trips and fall, which is basically major. You have trips and fall. Also, one of the causes of what? Consistently, one of the leading cause of what? Workplace injury. When you trip and fall. Like I said, if an electrical personnel or aspiring technicians, electricians, you should be able to observe and know how to walk around hazardous environment where you have cables running on the walkway or the floor. So trips and fall is one of other causes of what? Hazard. Of course, stress. Like I always tell my students, always work to what? Ease stress. Because when you are stressed up, you're not able to carry out what? Work properly. And of course, sometimes, except when you are doing troubleshooting, the proper troubleshooting is done when you are what? Focus. Your mindset is there. Physical and mental strength are what? Supposed to be what? In order. But sometimes we don't seem to recognize this. When somebody is not mentally balanced, you expect such a person to carry out the work properly. Even you, aspiring to be a contractor, to carry out contracts and carry out work and all that, it's not all the time. Sometimes, if you are not relaxed, you will not be able to reason well. These are one of the causes that can lead to what? Accidents. So, stress, mentally, physically, if you're not okay, it can. And of course, fatigue. What is fatigue? What is fatigue? When we refer to fatigue, it is when you are not what? Physically okay to carry out the job. You didn't sleep properly, and you come and you expect, especially when it has to do with electrical work. You're carrying out electrical work, many connections, and you're feeling sleepy. And before you know it, mistakenly, you make contact, especially when you are not um, wearing your hand glove as it requires that you should do before carrying out a job. Then you have yourself to blame. So we should always be careful when carrying out the job. If you didn't sleep properly, your mental self is not balanced, then you should be able to like excuse yourself or suspend the job if it has to do with your contract. And of course, shortcuts. Shortcuts, always is. We should never take shortcuts on our job. In everything you do, you should never take shortcuts. You should never take shortcuts, especially when dealing with what? Dangerous machineries or electrical work. Shortcuts. Shortcuts like you expected to use cutter to cut a cable, you use your teeth. Some of us will do it sharp. It can even damage your mouth or lips. Okay? Then of course there are some persons like overconfidence. It's another way. Overconfidence. You say shortcuts? Overconfidence. Because in a class, you must have somebody of that nature. Somebody that's full of, I can do it, I can do it. Until you carry out the job. Don't be too sure. Don't be too full of yourself. Having overconfidence can be the problem, can be cause to what? To accidents. Then we looked at what? Of course, which is basically poor housekeeping. Poor housekeeping. You know what it means when we say poor housekeeping? Like, of course, before and after the job is done, you must carry out proper housekeeping. So where there is no proper housekeeping, then we refer to it as what? Poor housekeeping. That you can see potential hazards around, workplace not arranged, machines not clean or properly what arranged, especially after, because the person that is going to take over, even if it has to deal with you finish the job, you didn't keep your tools properly, then you expect the next day you can see. Sometimes it falls, and if it falls, you are unable to even you sometimes you look for it, you don't see it, and you can hit it with your leg if proper PPE is not carried out. Of course, it's going to be a topic we're going to consider. So this poor housekeeping is another cause of hazard or accident. Then we looked at lack of what? Preparation. Like I said, you finished the job, you didn't do proper housekeeping, you didn't carry out your tools. At least take your tools back to where you took it from in the right way. Even if it is not you that is going back there to look for it, the next person can easily what? Take care of it. So lack of preparation, if you are not prepared and you make mistakes, it can lead to what? Accident or damage to equipment. Sometimes mistakenly, you can buy, maybe you're asked to go and connect a component to an equipment. You connect the wrong component and it's not properly installed. It can damage the entire machines. And of course, you know, a little amount of components you bought damage millions of machines. So, lack of preparation, lack of planning is one of the causes of what? Hazard through accident. And of course, mental distraction. Just like we have said in the case of what? Fatigue, stress, mental distraction. It's easier said than done, but the employee must try to leave personal matters. Personal matters, you must put it aside. Some of you that are married, when you have quarrel with your wife, then you go to work and you still reflect that in your head, it distracts you and it affects your mental thinking or doings. So it will affect your job. And if care is not taken, it will lead to what? Accident. So this you put into consideration. Of course, we have other, like you can talk about, like you say, overconfidence. You want to like, some of you like play, some of you like play. But this workshop, whenever you come for practicals, you must adhere strictly to the rules and regulations. When that is done, that is where you'll be able to walk safe and live safely. Okay? Have you noticed anything of this behavior we looked about, like the shortcut, mental distractions, overconfidence? Of course, it happens. If any of these falls among any of you, of course, you know you might have carried out job before, with all this in place, or maybe you were not feeling fine, you have a headache or mental distractions and all that. You're not prepared, but you just want to do the job just to satisfy the person or your supervisor or the person that gave you the job. You're not doing yourself good. So if you have been in such a behavior, you have seen this behavior in your workplace or in your environment, it is time to set up some what? Refresher training. And that is why we are carrying out this training, to enlighten you so that you reduce this risk of what? Injuries. And what? Improve overall performance in your organization or even as you carry out your personal jobs. So better safe than what? Sorry, as they say. You should be better safe than sorry. So that we will not maybe overlook all these causes and encounter what? Accident. Then we looked at electrical accident as it is. Electrical accident. These are general causes we looked at. So let's narrow it down to what? Electrical accident. When you say electrical accidents, then you looked at the leading causes, things that can lead to what? In the aspect of it, that's well connected to what? As it relates to what? Causes of what? Accidents. So what are the leading causes of electrical accidents? In the areas of drilling cable, drilling cable, or cutting through cable, the area of drilling cable or what? Drilling or cutting cable. if it's not properly done, it can lead to what? To accidents, electrical accidents. When you are using defective tools, defective electrical tools, defective electrical tools. Of course, where you are supposed to use cutter, you use razor blades and all that. If not handled properly, it cause electrical accidents. It might not necessarily be had shock or electrocutions, but damage to the body, failure to de-energize, failure to de-energize. You finish working in the workshop, then you refuse to what? De-energize the power. The circuit can continue to flow, and if care is not taken from the board, most especially during your practical sessions, these are things you need to consider, because when you are going to be carrying out the connections, electrical connections, you need to always learn not to power. And of course, after completion of the job, you ought to de-energize your circuit to avoid flow of electricity. Then, of course, failure to what? To guide, failure to guide life path. Life path of machines or equipment. Failure to guide life paths of electrical materials, it leads to what? Accident. Then, of course, thank God you are passing through this program. Unqualified workers carrying out or doing electrical work, you must be qualified. Unqualified worker or electrical personnel doing electrical work. This will lead to what? Accidents. At the end of the program, you will be what? Qualified to carry out any electrical work. Then, of course, improper installations or use, like we said about shortcut, improper installation, just do it temporarily and all that. When you carry out temporary work without putting into consideration the safety of the user, therefore, it will lead to what? Accidents. So, then, of course, bypassing protective devices, protective components. When you bypass, it's another factor. It's another leading cause of what? Electrical accidents. Not using proper grounding components when it comes to installation in electrical works. And of course, we looked at safety management in electricity. Safety management has to do with what? What does safety management lead to? When you manage or you carry out this job safely, it leads to what? Increase in what? In productivity. It leads to what? Increase in productivity. Of course, it's enable you to avoid what? Injuries and cause effects when it comes to time consuming, stressful and inconvenience incidents and all that. And of course, if these proper leading causes that we have atomized is carefully looked at and avoid, you avoid them, you have avoid, even if it has to do with one fatality, leading cause. And before there is a fatal situation or a fatal incident as a result of shock, there might have been several of what? 300,000. If before this, there might be 300,000 what? Risk behaviors. Of course, you remember in our first lesson where we looked at risk as it leads to what? Accident from hazard. These conditions, risk behavior, improper way of carrying out electrical work, improper way of doing things. This can lead to what? Destination. And of course, with this, maybe 3,000 near miss. 3,000 near miss. This might have been, you might have recorded injuries, over 300 injuries. Recorded or non recorded, 300 injuries. Before you can consider this. So, you must be properly observe these hazards or leading causes of what? Accidents. Leading causes of what? Accidents. You must consider them properly to avoid what? Electrical accidents. Okay? So ratio of serious accident to near miss, that is what we looked at here in the course. Then, what is the effect of electricity on the human body? Since we're considering causes, if peradventure you made contact, you ignore safe handling, you ignore the safety rules, then you make contact. It has four major types of electrical injuries that you observe. It has to do with direct and what? Indirect. When it comes to direct, you group direct and what? Indirect injuries in effect of causes of electricity. Direct and what? Indirect. The direct effect has to do with what? Direct effect has to do with electrocution, shock, electrocution, shock, burn, as it affects the human scene. And you can see the cause of this topic, electrocution, like we've explained earlier in our previous lessons, has to do with what? Death as a result of shock. That is the direct effect of electricity. Then shock, the burns that can cause desiccation, and of course, burn, different types of burn. We have the first degree, second degree, and of course, what? Third degree, as you can see. Difference. Of course, the indirect has to do with what? Fall. That is to say, when you are walking on a height, if you make contact and you mistakenly avoid these leading causes, it will lead to what? Fall. And of course, when you fall, secondary effects, maybe where you eat with your head and all that can brings about what? The severity. So we must be careful to avoid this. And of course, effect of electricity on the human body, like we talked about, effect of shock, there are categories. Remember, I said 1 milliamp. Make contact with 1 milliamp of current, there is a tinkling sensation. There is a tinkling sensation. Once you make contact with this amount, there's a tinkling sensation you encounter. Okay, what about when it has to do with 5 milliamps and above? It's faint sensation. 5 milliamps, slight shock. You felt slight shock. Then we looked at another range between 6 to what? Between 6 to 30 milliamps. There's a painful shock. There's a painful shock. Painful shock. Of course, in this case, muscle contractions. This is a range where what? Freezing current starts. It may not be possible to let go at this range, and possibly leads to what? To death. You can see that on the screen. 60 to 30 milliamp, painful shock, muscle contractions, and the resultant effect is what? Death. 50 to 150 milliamps are the case, is extremely painful. As it increases, that is when you make contact with a higher amount of current you make contact with, the effect is deadly damage. Now, cardiac arrest, when it comes to 10,000 milliamps, that is, we're looking at 10 amps, as small as 1 amp, of course, death has already occurred. So, like I always say, take care when using electricity because it has the power to kill. We need to be what? Careful. Because as an apprentice of the industrial electronics, we're going to be making use of electricity always. So we need to take care of using electricity because it has the power to kill. So the longer the exposure, the increased danger of shock to what? To the victim. But looked at it. So low voltage, I always say, does not mean what? Low hazard. We need to be very, very careful when dealing with electricity. Like you can see on the screen, you have a situation of burns, which we consider burns. Burns caused by electricity may be of different types. Like I said, we have first degree, second degree burns, third degree burns. So electrical burns need to be given you what? Immediate medical attention. You need to be given immediate medical attention. A third degree burns can just lead to even amputation. Third degree burns can lead to amputations if proper care is not taken. So this is the reason why, okay, we need to be careful while dealing with what? Electricity. So effects of injuries have to do with cardiac arrest and respiratory failure, muscle, nerves, tissue destructions, of course, burns, as we have seen different types of burns, as in the case of burns that can be parts of the human skin forever, and of course, the burns that has to do with degrees of burns, like we say the first degree, second, and what? Third degree kind of burns, thermal burns. Then secondary injury, like we have considered early, and of course, all these we have considered, if put into consideration, we'll be able to work or carry out electrical work perfectly without any injury or damage to our body or equipment. So you consider yourself first in carrying out electrical work, therefore you are able to handle the equipment and the environment properly without any loss. Okay, so so far we've covered causes of hazards, like you can see, and accidents. We looked at electrical accidents. We looked at ranges of currents and the effects. Then we looked at types of uh, causes, leading causes. We talked about lifting. We talked about lighting, violence, trips for stress, overconfidence, poor housekeeping, mental distractions, like I've told us. All these are leading causes of what? Hazards and what? Accidents. So if you are working safely without getting involved in any of these leading causes, you'll be able to work free and safe. Thank you very much as we draw this lesson to a close.